3 words. That's all it took for Vincent "Clutch" Mello to sign his own death warrant on July 8th, 1936. 3 words screamed at a Harlem speakeasy loud enough for 200 people to hear. 3 words that made Bumpy Johnson go silent, made his eyes go cold, made every person in that room understand that Vincent Mello had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The 3 words, "You uppity Negro." Vincent Mello was a white collector working for Lucky Luciano. He'd been in Harlem for 6 months collecting policy money, and he'd gotten comfortable. Too comfortable. He thought because he worked for Luciano, because he was white, because he carried a gun, that he was untouchable. He was wrong. Bumpy Johnson walked up to Vincent at the bar. Calm. No weapon visible. No bodyguards. Just Bumpy. And he said 5 words that made Vincent's blood run cold. "You're coming with me." Now, Vincent tried to refuse. Tried to reach for his gun. But before his hand touched the grip, 4 of Bumpy's men appeared from the crowd. They grabbed Vincent, dragged him out of the speakeasy, threw him into a car, and drove away. That was July 8th, 1936, at 11:47 at night. Vincent "Clutch" Mello was never seen again. Not by his family. Not by Lucky Luciano. Not by anyone. He simply disappeared. And everyone in Harlem knew why. You don't disrespect Bumpy Johnson. Not in his neighborhood. Not in front of his people. Not ever. This is a story of what happened to Vincent Mello. The story of how Bumpy Johnson made someone vanish. And the story of why, for the next 30 years, nobody dared speak Bumpy's name without respect. Summer of 1936. Harlem, New York. The Numbers War between Dutch Schultz and Madame Stephanie St. Clair's operation had ended 6 months earlier. Dutch had been killed by Lucky Luciano's hitmen on October 23rd, 1935. Shot in a Newark restaurant. Dead the next day. With Dutch gone, Bumpy Johnson had negotiated directly with Lucky Luciano. They'd made a deal. Bumpy could run the day-to-day operations of Harlem's numbers racket. In exchange, Luciano's organization would get a percentage of the profits, 25% off the top. It wasn't perfect, but it was peace. And for the first time in years, Harlem could breathe, but nobody knew that peace wouldn't last. Bumpy Johnson was 31 years old in July 1936. Born in Charleston, South Carolina, he'd come to Harlem as a teenager, worked his way up through the criminal underworld. By 1936, he was the undisputed boss of Harlem streets. He controlled the numbers, protected the neighborhood, and maintained order through a combination of respect, fear, and strategic violence. Bumpy had a reputation. If you crossed him, you paid. If you disrespected him, you disappeared. Simple as that. His wife Mamie would later write in her memoir that Bumpy kidnapped and murdered over 40 people during his career, most during the war with Dutch Schultz, but some after, when people forgot the rules, when outsiders thought they could come into Harlem and act however they wanted. But here's what made Bumpy different from other gangsters. He didn't kill for pleasure. He killed for purpose. Every disappearance sent a message. Every body, or lack of body, was a lesson. And the lesson was always the same. Respect Harlem. Respect the community. Respect Bumpy Johnson. Vincent "Clutch" Mello didn't understand that lesson. Vincent was 28 years old in 1936, born in Brooklyn to Italian immigrant parents. He'd worked for Lucky Luciano's organization since 1933, started as a runner, worked his way up to collector. By 1936, he was one of Luciano's most reliable men. Tough, efficient, not afraid to use violence when necessary. In early 1936, after the deal between Bumpy and Luciano was finalized, Vincent was assigned to Harlem. His job was simple. Collect the 25% that Luciano's organization was owed from the numbers operation. Meet with Bumpy's lieutenants once a week. Pick up the money. Report back to Luciano. Easy work. Good pay. No problems. Except Vincent had a problem. He was racist. Not quietly racist. Not the kind who kept his opinions to himself. Vincent was loud about it. He'd make comments. Use slurs. Talk down to the black numbers runners he collected from. And for the first few months, people tolerated it because he worked for Luciano. Because starting trouble with him meant starting trouble with the Italian mob, because it wasn't worth the war. But that's when nobody expected what would happen next. Bumpy Johnson heard about Vincent's behavior, the slurs, the disrespect, the way Vincent talked to Harlem residents like they were beneath him. And Bumpy made a decision. He was going to teach Vincent Mello a lesson, but not the kind of lesson Vincent could learn from. The kind of lesson everyone else would learn by watching. On July 7th, 1936, Bumpy sent word to Vincent. He wanted to meet, discuss some issues with the collections. Nothing serious, just business. They'd meet at the Rhythm Club on 132nd Street, 8 o'clock the next evening. Vincent agreed. He saw no reason to be concerned. This was business, routine. But little did Vincent know, Bumpy had been planning this for weeks. July 8th, 1936, 7:30 in the evening. The Rhythm Club was packed. It was Wednesday night, live jazz, cheap drinks. The place was always busy midweek. 200 people, drinking, dancing, talking, enjoying themselves. Vincent Mello arrived at 7:50. 10 minutes early. He came alone. No bodyguards. Why would he need them? This was a business meeting. He walked to the bar, ordered whiskey, waited for Bumpy. At 8:15, Bumpy Johnson walked in. But he didn't walk to Vincent. He sat at a table in the back corner with 3 of his men, and he just watched. Vincent saw him, started to walk over, but one of Bumpy's men held up his hand. Not yet. Wait. Vincent was confused, but he went back to the bar, ordered another whiskey, and waited. That's when everything started to go wrong. At 8:30, one of Bumpy's lieutenants, a man named Illinois Gordon, approached Vincent at the bar. Illinois was calm, professional. He asked Vincent about the collections, the numbers, the percentages. Everything seemed normal. But then Illinois said something that made Vincent uncomfortable. Mr. Johnson wants to know why you've been disrespecting our people. Vincent tried to play it off. I don't know what you're talking about. Illinois didn't blink. The slurs, the comments, the way you talk down to our runners. Mr. Johnson knows everything that happens in Harlem, and he's not happy. Vincent's face turned red. He'd been drinking. His judgment was impaired. And instead of apologizing, instead of showing respect, Vincent made the worst decision of his life. He raised his voice, loud enough for people nearby to hear. He looked Illinois Gordon in the eye, and he said it. You uppity Negro. The bar went silent. People stopped talking. The band kept playing, but conversations died. Everyone turned to look, because in that moment, Vincent Mello had just disrespected not just Illinois Gordon, but Bumpy Johnson, in Bumpy's club, in Bumpy's neighborhood, in front of Bumpy's people. Illinois didn't move, didn't react. He just turned and walked back to Bumpy's table, whispered something in Bumpy's ear, and Bumpy stood up. Bumpy Johnson walked through the crowd toward Vincent Mello. Slowly, deliberately, every eye in the Rhythm Club was on him. The band stopped playing. The bartender stepped back. Vincent realized his mistake. He reached for the pistol in his waistband. But Bumpy was faster, not with a gun, with words. You're coming with me. Now. Vincent's hand froze. He looked around the bar. 200 people staring at him, not with sympathy, with something else. Anticipation. They knew what was about to happen. Vincent tried to back down. Look, I didn't mean anything by it. I was just... Bumpy cut him off. You said what you said. In front of my people. In my club. Now you're going to answer for it. Vincent tried to run. He turned toward the door. But 4 of Bumpy's men were already there, blocking his exit. He turned the other way. More men. He was surrounded, trapped, and nobody in that bar was going to help him because Vincent had disrespected Harlem, and Harlem was Bumpy's. But nobody knew what Bumpy had planned next. Bumpy gestured to his men. They grabbed Vincent, one on each arm. Vincent struggled, tried to fight, but they were stronger. They dragged him toward the back door of the club. Vincent screamed, threatened, told them Lucky Luciano would kill them all, but his threats meant nothing. They threw Vincent into a black Packard sedan parked in the alley behind the Rhythm Club. Bumpy got him beside him, 2 more men in the front. The car drove away. And that's when everything went wrong for Vincent. The car didn't go to a warehouse, didn't go to an abandoned building. It drove to a residential building on Edgecombe Avenue, Sugar Hill, one of Harlem's nicest neighborhoods. They pulled Vincent out of the car, dragged him into the building, down to the basement. And that's where Vincent Mello's nightmare began. The basement was empty. Concrete floor, brick walls, 1 bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling, a metal chair bolted to the floor, and a drain in the center of the room. Vincent saw that drain and understood. This wasn't an interrogation. This wasn't a beating. This was an execution. He started begging. Please, I'm sorry. I mean it. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll leave Harlem. I'll never come back. Just let me go. Bumpy sat down on a wooden crate, lit a cigarette, and spoke quietly. You think this is about an apology? You think you can use that word in my neighborhood and just say sorry? Vincent kept begging. I work for Luciano. If you kill me, he'll come after you. He'll start a war. But what Vincent didn't realize was that Bumpy had already thought of that. That's when the real twist happened. Bumpy pulled out a piece of paper. He handed it to one of his men, who read it out loud. It was a letter from Lucky Luciano, dated July 5th, 1936, 3 days before this meeting. The letter said, if Vincent Mello disrespects your people or your neighborhood, handle it however you see fit. He does not speak for me or my organization. Vincent's face went pale. Luciano had given Bumpy permission, had washed his hands of Vincent, had sacrificed him to keep the peace with Harlem. Vincent realized that nobody was coming to save him. Bumpy stood up. He walked over to Vincent, got close enough that Vincent could smell the cigarette smoke. You want to know what happens to people who disrespect Harlem? They disappear. And that's exactly what you're going to do. Disappear. Bumpy turned to his men. Take him. The next part of what happened to Vincent Mello has never been confirmed, because nobody who was in that basement that night ever talked about it. But years later, an old member of Bumpy's crew, a man dying of cancer in 1967, told a story to a priest. The priest later repeated it, and the story became legend in Harlem. According to that dying man, Vincent Mello didn't die quickly. He died over 3 days, kept in that basement. Questioned about who he'd talked to, what he'd said. Who else from Luciano's organization disrespected Harlem? Vincent talked, gave up names, locations, information, hoping it would save him. It didn't. But here's what shocked even Bumpy's own men. On the 3rd day, July 11th, 1936, Bumpy did something nobody expected. He brought Vincent upstairs, gave him water, food, let him clean up, and then he sat down with Vincent and explained something. I'm going to give you a choice. You can die here, tonight, quick, painless, or you can leave New York, forever, change your name, never come back, never contact your family, never speak to anyone from Luciano's organization again. You disappear completely, live somewhere else under a new identity. And if I ever hear that you've come back, if I ever hear your real name again, I'll find you, and it won't be quick. Vincent chose to disappear. But that's when the story takes its darkest turn, because Bumpy never intended to let him go. The choice was a test, to see if Vincent would beg for his life again, to see if he'd choose the coward's way out. And Vincent did. So Bumpy made his final decision. That night, July 11th, 1936, Vincent Mello was taken from the basement, put back in the Packard, driven to the Hudson River. And according to that dying crew member's confession, Vincent was weighted down with chains and dropped into the river, alive, conscious, drowning slowly. His body was never found. The currents carried out to sea. And Vincent clutched Mello ceased to exist. July 12, 1936. The next morning, word spread through Harlem that Vincent Mello had disappeared. People who'd been at the Rhythm Club told the story. How Vincent had disrespected Illinois Gordon. How Bumpy had walked up to him. How Vincent was dragged out. how he was never seen again. The story became a warning, a legend, proof that Bumpy Johnson's Harlem had rules. And breaking those rules had consequences. But what happened next shocked everyone. Lucky Luciano called Bumpy, asked what happened to Vincent, and Bumpy told him the truth. He disrespected my people, so I made him disappear. Luciano's response was simple. Good. He was becoming a problem anyway. That conversation changed everything, because it proved that Bumpy Johnson had the respect of the most powerful mob boss in New York, that Bumpy could kill one of Luciano's men and face no consequences, that Harlem truly belonged to Bumpy. Over the next 30 years, the story of Vincent Mello's disappearance will be told hundreds of times, each time slightly different. Some versions said Vincent was tortured for weeks. Others said he was shot immediately. Some claimed his body was buried under a Harlem building. Others said he was fed to pigs upstate. But the truth, as confirmed by multiple sources, including Bumpy's wife Mamie, was simpler and darker. Vincent Mello had been made an example, kidnapped, questioned, and killed, his body disposed of so completely that even decades later, nobody knew exactly where he ended up. But here's what most people don't understand about that night. Bumpy Johnson didn't kill Vincent Mello out of anger. He killed him out of necessity, because Vincent represented something dangerous. The idea that outsiders could come into Harlem and disrespect the community without consequences. The idea that working for Lucky Luciano made you untouchable. The idea that black neighborhoods had to tolerate racism from white gangsters. Bumpy ended that idea permanently. By making Vincent disappear, Bumpy sent multiple messages to Harlem residents. The message was clear: I protect you. Nobody disrespects our community. To Lucky Luciano's organization, the message was equally clear: respect Harlem or face consequences, even if you work for Luciano. To other white gangsters who operated in black neighborhoods, the message was a warning. The days of treating black people like second-class citizens are over, at least in Harlem. Those messages worked. After Vincent's disappearance, collectors from Luciano's organization changed their behavior. They showed respect. They used proper language. They treated Harlem residents as equals, not because they suddenly stopped being racist, but because they were terrified of ending up like Vincent Mello, disappeared, forgotten, gone forever. Years later, in 1952, a young hustler in Harlem asked an old-timer what made Bumpy Johnson so dangerous. The old-timer told him the story of Vincent Mello. He said, Bumpy didn't just kill people. He erased them, made them vanish so completely that even their families wondered if they'd ever existed. Vincent Mello walked into the Rhythm Club on July 8, 1936. He never walked out. His body was never found. His family never got closure. And everybody in Harlem knew why. He disrespected Bumpy Johnson. The old-timer continued. That's what made Bumpy different from other gangsters. Dutch Schultz killed people in public, made spectacles, wanted everyone to see. But Bumpy made people disappear, quietly, completely, and that was more terrifying. Because when you kill someone publicly, people know it's over. When you make someone disappear, people wonder. They imagine. They fear. And that fear is more powerful than any bullet. The young hustler never forgot that story. And for the next 20 years, until Bumpy's death in 1968, that young hustler showed nothing but respect whenever Bumpy's name was mentioned, because he understood. Disrespect to be forgiven, but disrespect in front of community, that was unforgivable. Bumpy Johnson's wife Mamie confirmed in her memoir that Bumpy kidnapped and killed over 40 people during his career. Most were during the Numbers War with Dutch Schultz, rival gangsters, Dutch's collectors, men who threatened Harlem's operation. But some, like Vincent Mello, were killed after the war, when the peace had been established. When Bumpy was supposed to be cooperating with the Italian mob, those disappearances were the most important, because they proved that Bumpy's loyalty was to Harlem first, not to Lucky Luciano, not to mob, not to money, to Harlem. And anyone who forgot, that ended up like Vincent Mello, in the river, forgotten, erased from history. But the consequences of Vincent's disappearance went beyond just fear. It established something unprecedented in organized crime history: a black neighborhood with its own rules, its own justice system, its own authority figure who answered to nobody. For the next 30 years, until Bumpy's death on July 7, 1968, Harlem operated under Bumpy's protection. Yes, they gave Luciano his percentage. Yes, they cooperated with the Italian mob. But Harlem was autonomous, self-governing, and that autonomy was built on moments like July 8, 1936, when Bumpy Johnson proved that disrespecting Harlem had deadly consequences. Vincent Mello's family never found out what happened to him. In September 1936, 2 months after his disappearance, Vince's mother came to Harlem. She walked into the Rhythm Club, asked if anyone had seen her son. Nobody answered. The bartender, the same one who'd been working the night Vincent disappeared, just shook his head. Lady, nobody by that name has ever been here. Vincent's mother went to the police, filed a missing persons report. The cops investigated, asked around Harlem, got the same response everywhere. Never heard of him. The investigation went nowhere. Vincent Mello's case was closed as unsolved. His family eventually accepted that he was dead, but they never knew how, or why, or where his body ended up. And that lack of closure was intentional, part of Bumpy's strategy, because families without bodies keep searching, keep asking questions, keep spreading the story. And every time someone asked about Vincent Mello, they were reminded he disrespected Bumpy Johnson, and he disappeared. The legend of Vincent Mello's disappearance grew over the decades. By the 1960s, parents in Harlem used it as a cautionary tale. Be respectful. Watch your mouth. Remember what happened to that white collector who used slurs? He vanished, and nobody ever found him. Young people growing up in Harlem during the 40s, 50s, and 60s all knew the story. Some versions were exaggerated. Some details were wrong. But the core truth remained. Bumpy Johnson made people who disrespected Harlem disappear. And Vincent Mello was the most famous example. When Bumpy died on July 7, 1968, thousands attended his funeral. Malcolm X's widow, Betty Shabazz, was there. Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr. spoke. The streets of Harlem were packed with mourners. And among the stories told that day, one kept coming up: the story of Vincent Mello, the man who disrespected Bumpy in 1936 and was never seen again. It was told not as a celebration of violence, but as proof of Bumpy's dedication to Harlem, proof that he'd protected the neighborhood, stood up for its dignity, demanded respect, even if it meant making people disappear, even if it meant going to war with the Italian mob. Bumpy's legacy wasn't built on being the toughest, or the richest, or the most violent. It was built on being the most protective. And Vincent Mello's disappearance was the ultimate proof of that protection. Look, the story of Vincent Mello isn't just about a murder. It's about respect, about dignity, about what happens when you treat people like they're less than human. Vincent Mello walked into Harlem thinking he was superior, thinking his whiteness, his mob connections, his gun made him untouchable. He was wrong. July 8, 1936. 3 words. You uppity Negro. 5 words in response. You're coming with me. Now. And Vincent Mello was never seen again. No body, no funeral, no closure, just disappearance. Complete, total, permanent. That's Bumpy Johnson's legacy. Not just a gangster, but a protector. A man who made Harlem a place where disrespect had consequences, where outsiders couldn't just walk in and treat people however they wanted, where the community was defended, no matter the cost. Vincent Mello learned that lesson, but he didn't live to tell it, because the lesson wasn't for him. It was for everyone else. Everyone who thought about disrespecting Harlem. Everyone who thought about using slurs. Everyone who thought working for Lucky Luciano made them immune to consequences. They all learned from Vincent's disappearance. And they never forgot. 32 years after Vincent vanished, Bumpy Johnson died. The man who'd kidnapped and killed over 40 people. The man who protected Harlem for 3 decades. The man who made Vincent Mello disappear. And when Bumpy was buried, someone placed a note on his grave. Just 7 words. Harlem was safer because of you. That's the truth. Controversial, complicated, but true. If this story about Bumpy Johnson's ultimate act of protection got your attention, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because we're dropping true crime history stories every single week. Drop a comment and tell me, was Bumpy Johnson justified or did he go too far? Should Vincent Mello have been given a second chance? And turn on notifications because next week we're telling the story of how Bumpy Johnson walked into Dutch Schultz's Bronx headquarters unarmed and walked out with a peace treaty. Remember, in the world of 1930s organized crime, respect was everything. Territory was everything. And protecting your community was everything. Vincent Mello forgot that. He disrespected Harlem in front of Harlem's protector, and he paid the ultimate price. July 8th, 1936. 3 words that cost a life. 1 kidnapping that sent message. 1 disappearance that became legend. Harlem never saw Vincent Mello again because Bumpy Johnson made sure of it. And for the next 30 years, nobody dared disrespect Harlem because they all remembered what happened to man who did.